Iris POV pregnancy test result. Single live intrauterine pregnancy species test. 99% probability human alone in the doctor's office, while she got me some medicine. I read the simple lines of text several times before they truly made sense that I was carrying a child. That I looked at the second line again. A smile breaking out across my face. A human baby born of me and Arthur. My fated mate. That I had to tell him right now. That I dialed his number with fingers that shook slightly. Glad I was already sitting down. A bubble of happiness swelled up from my heart, and I released it with a laugh. The phone, however, went straight to voicemail, meaning his phone was off. Swallowing my disappointment, but all too aware that Arthur tended to avoid distractions while at work, including just ignoring my calls, I tried to keep my voice cheerful. Arthur, it's Iris. I know you're busy, and I wish you good luck with the candidacy, but I have some news for you. Great news. I pressed my lips shut. Voicemail was not the way I wanted to tell him. News this good needed to be told in person. Anyway, please give me a call when you hear this. Love you. I hung up and wrapped my arms around myself tightly. I felt ready to explode. If it were a normal day, I would hop in my car and drive to Arthur's office. But it wasn't a normal day. Arthur was meeting with election officials and members of his party to see whether his bid as a presidential candidate would be accepted. A powerful alpha werewolf since his birth, he'd been working toward this goal his whole life, and there was no question he would make an exceptional leader. This was no time for me to be pestering him, even if this were the best news of my life. But tonight, when he returned home with his good news, I would tell him mine. Our good news. The doctor returned with a smile and handed me a bottle. Take 2 of these with food twice a day for your nausea. Can you tell how far along I am? I asked. For weeks. I'd like to see you and your husband back here next week, so we can go through your schedule for the next 9 months. He's not my husband yet, but I'm sure he'll be fine with that. She opened a folder and studied some pages in a failed attempt to hide her look of disapproval. He's human, I presume? No, an alpha werewolf, I said. She looked up in surprise. We're fated. Her smile looked more genuine now that she knew I wasn't some human living off the system, but a future mother fated to mate with a socially prominent werewolf. This was Providence working its magic. Such a rare and lovely match. Tell Brett to arrange that appointment, but call me if you aren't feeling better with the medicine. I kept smiling as I walked to my car. Arthur would be so happy, and I knew he would be a wonderful partner in this pregnancy. Although I was human and Arthur was of course a werewolf alpha, lending him the highest possible social status, I had always believed that we could handle any judgment or prejudice our still somewhat hierarchical society might throw our way, because we love each other. Despite our polar opposite upbringings, fate had plans for us, drawing us irrevocably and irresistibly towards each other. Besides, things were changing. Even 50 years ago, a human-werewolf relationship such as ours, fated mates or not, would have been seen as a laughable embarrassment for any alpha. Though progress was slow, it was tangible, as humans began to prove themselves worthy of more than just positions of subservience. Yes, both humans and werewolf classes alike still preferred to mingle mainly amongst their own kind, alphas being particularly notorious for this. But I had always chosen to focus on the progress, rather than the challenges humans still faced in our society. On the drive home, I started to think about our wedding plans. Arthur and I had been together for a year now, and moved in together 6 months ago. It's quite a long engagement for fated mates, but as a human, I'm fine with taking it slow. Now with the child, I guess we had to think about getting married. I pulled up in front of our house and looked it over with new eyes. It was a 2-bedroom. Would we need to get a bigger place now? But then, if Arthur were to become the next alpha president, we'd be living at the president's residence in the capital for the next 10 years. 20 if he were re-elected. It was enough to make me giddy. I set my purse down and went into the kitchen. I made myself a cup of herbal tea. No caffeine or alcohol for me for a while. I realized I was humming the Beatles' song Penny Lane and laughed. You're in a good mood, a familiar and beloved voice said from behind me. With a little squeal, I turned around, cup in hand. Arthur looked magnificent in his dark gray suit that set off the width of his shoulders and the trim lines of his waist and hips. More than that, He looked happy, his face uplifted by one of his rare deep smiles. You got it? He gave a little bow. You are now looking at the latest and greatest candidate for Alpha President. I set down the cup and ran to him to wrap him up in a hug. He laughed, a rare event, and kissed me so deeply my toes curled. When he raised his head, I smiled into his face and wondered if our baby would inherit his dark hair and even darker green eyes. Your voicemail said you had news as well? He asked. I nodded, and it felt like I had champagne in my blood. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the report. Looking puzzled, he took it from me and unfolded it. His eyes scanned the page, and his smile disappeared. I noticed his body going stiff and his dark brows pulled down in a frown. He looked at me, and his expression was shuttered. You're pregnant? He asked flatly. With a human fetus? Well, yes, but don't call it a fetus. It's our baby, our perfect little baby. He looked back down at the test results, and now his eyes were hard and cold. Arthur? I asked, my whole body going cold. What's wrong? Iris Povey waited for an answer, but Arthur just looked at me, his expression going from cold to unreadable. I was going to insist he say something when someone knocked loudly on our door. Arthur turned and opened the door wide, smiling his professional smile as several people came through. I recognized some of them from articles and TV interviews where they'd been discussing Arthur's possible candidacy, but others were strangers. They were all obviously, though not ostentatiously, wealthy, and they were all alphas, except two beta males who acted like assistants to their alpha bosses. Feeling the pressure to be a gracious hostess, I stepped forward and welcomed them all to our home, but they only made the briefest eye contact with a few nods and then seemed to forget I existed. So you're the human? One of them asked with that haughty but not quite insulting disdain I was so used to from alphas. He was about Arthur's age but not quite as tall and sporting well-coiffed light brown hair. I said something about my name, but no one seemed to notice that either. Why don't you go upstairs and have a rest? Arthur turned to me, and I was hoping he would use the moment to introduce me properly, but instead he said, we can continue what we were talking about later. I wanted to protest, to point out that as his future wife and mother to his child I had every reason to remain with these people as they discussed Arthur's future. But Arthur's eyes had gone cold, not the ones that I'm familiar with, and with reluctance I agreed, stepping back from a part of Arthur's life I had never truly realized before excluded me. Yes, I thought as I climbed the stairs with what felt like lead in my shoes, my life with Arthur had always been private, but I had never thought he was ashamed of me or wanted to hide me from the other people in his life. Had I been naive? Those alphas hadn't treated me with the respect one would give to a housemaid. I went into the main bedroom to change out of the suit I'd worn to the doctor's and put on my jeans and paint-splattered smock, which made me feel better right away. My canvas was as I had left it, washes and waves of bright colors that would become the background to the field of wildflowers I was painting to celebrate my recent BA in fine art. Growing up, I'd always known I wanted to paint. The only true obstacle was money, but I'd worked hard and received several scholarships to get through college in 4 years. It took a little longer than usual, but eventually I was lost in my art, what Arthur liked to call my otherworld trance. The brush was an extension of my body that allowed me to soar and dance. I was painting in oils, which I ground and mixed up myself, and the images on the canvas were coming together just as I wanted. I breathed in the smell of linseed oil, which I knew some people found harsh, but it was an old friend to me, like an actor and the smell of grease paint, I supposed. It was the one area of my life where I had found praise and appreciation even from betas and alphas. I found myself wondering if any of the alphas downstairs liked art before sternly telling myself I didn't need their approval. I found it much harder to concentrate than usual. I'd been given 2 great pieces of news with the baby and Arthur's candidacy, so why was I feeling so alone, so far removed from my mate? I scowled at my canvas. The joy I was trying to show wasn't coming through. The lines looked uncertain and confused. I painted undisturbed until the sun went down, powering through until I was a little happier with the painting. If not with my situation in general, painting in artificial light had never worked for me, even when my subject was abstract. I crept down to the kitchen and made a sandwich, listening to the murmur of the alphas' voices in the living room, then went back upstairs and looked over the canvas I was prepping before giving it a good sanding. I went to bed alone, feeling cold and unsettled. Much later, well past midnight, Arthur joined me, his body a little damp from his nightly shower. Still mostly asleep, I rolled over then and put an arm over his chest. He responded immediately, chuckling softly, and held me back tenderly that I was half asleep, so it was not a good time to discuss our baby, but I felt my fears dissipate somewhat as he kissed my chin, my forehead, and then my lips. His warm hand ran over my shoulder and around my back, and again I was pleasantly overwhelmed with the sensation of the way my fated mate just fit against my body and, I presume, my soul. He pulled down the strap of my nightgown and kissed my shoulder, then down to my beast's, which he bared to the cool air of the room and his own warm breath that I shivered, and I felt him smile. But even as I responded to his touch, I wondered how real this was. I was still feeling that ambivalence the next morning, but I waited. Arthur and I both had a little coffee before I asked, "Are you ready to talk about the pregnancy now?" "Yes, we do need to talk," he said, "but I have to get to the office." "I see. This evening then." He shook his head and looked at his watch. "I have an alpha gathering and fundraiser this evening after work at the Waldorf, so don't wait up for me." "The Waldorf?" I repeated, smiling at him with gritted teeth. "Sounds like fun. I've never been there." He shrugged and then drained his coffee. "Alpha's only like last night. You wouldn't have anyone to talk to." I wanted to say he could introduce me to his friends and then I would have many people to talk to, but instead I pressed him for at least some feedback about our child. He took his briefcase off the counter and checked inside. "If you want to keep it, I'll cover all expenses, of course." "Expenses?" I asked, deeply disappointed and not bothering to hide it. He looked up then. "Children are expensive, and my child should be raised with care and respect. You'll need to step up for at least this year while I campaign." "But we're fated mates," I objected. "Shouldn't we get married when we're having a child?" He looked at me sternly. "Voters will not like a human Luna." My mouth opened in shock. "That is so discriminatory. You told me you would be running on a platform for human wolf equality." He looked like he restrained himself from rolling his eyes. "There's a big difference between championing for people's rights and shoving a human Luna down their throats." "What did you just say?" I leapt up from my stool and stood there. He waved at me, using the motion to check his watch. "Look, I'll easily be able to give you $1 million for raising the kid," he said, lingering slightly on the human slang for child. "That's more than you'll need." I almost threw something at him. "This is about your fatherhood to our child, not money. Look, I have to get to work, and I'll be working a lot more for a while. You tend to things as you think best." He stood and grabbed his briefcase, and my anger just kept me standing there to watch him walk out of the kitchen. I heard the door to the garage open and close. I in a sort of fog. I cleaned up the plates from breakfast. What was happening? Was I the mother of his child, his fated mate, and his future wife or not? And if not, what the hell was I? I sat on the sofa in the living room, unable even to gather myself enough to paint. Nothing made any sense, and everything I had thought my life wasn't real. I was too stunned even to cry. There was a brisk knock then, and I walked robotically to the front door, wondering if Arthur had forgotten something. A tall, beautiful alpha woman stood there. "Hello," I asked her. "May I help you? Who are you?" "Oh, I'm Selena," she said with a polished smile. "Arthur's fiancée. I came to see who I'll be sharing my husband with." Iris POV. "What?" I asked, though I wasn't any more shocked than I had been before opening the door. Life had lost its context. This was just something on top of what had already occurred. "May I come in?" she asked even as she strode past me with a whip of blonde hair and whiff of expensive perfume. I watched from behind as she walked to the sofa, her long legs impeccably cased in black velvet pants and her top covered in wispy layers of purple silk. She set herself down. "Do you have any coffee?" she asked. "You're going to marry Arthur?" I asked as I pushed the front door closed. "Yes, and soon." She looked smug. At first, of course, when I heard he had some human lover he adored, I said no way. But then the situation was explained to me, and well-being Luna isn't something one just turns down, is it? She frowned and looked at the armchair that so perfectly matched the sofa. "Aren't you going to sit down?" I walked over to the chair and sat. My feet felt a little numb and so did my fingers. "So," she said the second I was in the chair, "he's told me you're pregnant, so obviously we need to talk about that. Also, do you have some sort of career you're pursuing?" "I think I need to talk to Arthur before you and I talk further," I said. "Call him," she said with a shrug. It was difficult to retrieve my phone from my pocket and dial Arthur with my numb fingers, but I managed it. It went to voicemail. I need to wait for him to see my number and call back. Selena snorted, looked at me with pity, and then pulled out her phone, which I saw she put on speaker after dialing a number. It rang twice. Yes, Selena? Arthur's voice asked, and my stomach sank. It was clear which of us Arthur took seriously. Honey, she said, smiling at me in triumph. What time are we going to see the engagement dress and rings tomorrow? Arthur sounded a bit impatient but replied, 10:30. I've already booked the seaside mansion for the engagement party. Do whatever you want, he said, and I could see the expression easily on his face. I'm hanging up. She made a little girl face and spoke in a slightly higher voice. Haven't you told your little lover about this yet? Her name is Iris. Selena raised her eyebrows at me as if to say I should be happy he admitted it. I didn't care. And I told you she doesn't need to know. Aren't you afraid she'll leave you once she finds out? She needs my money. Arthur's response was quick and certain. With student loans and a child on the way, how could she leave? Ah, I thought, and I found myself nodding as some things started to make sense. Not the least was his offer of $1 million to meet my need. That was evidently how he really saw me. Not a future artist he was helping to meet her goals, but just some gold-digging parasite. Did he think our child was a parasite too? Selena was still talking into the phone about the child. I've thought it over. I don't want Iris to give birth before our wedding. It would be a scandal. Forcing a woman to have an abortion is illegal, even a human one. I noticed his tone was angry. He was probably worried people would find out and it would hurt his campaign. Be careful you don't end up in jail. So, numb throughout my body now, I tried to make myself accept that Arthur didn't want the child, and his only concern was avoiding legal trouble. I opened my mouth to tell him I was there and had heard every word. But Selena just made a kiss-kiss noise into the phone and ended the call. Well, I can't force you, it's true, she said to me. But you really need to scrape that thing out of you before it causes Arthur trouble. Besides, that my husband will have a human mistress is bad enough. I don't need a child in the mix. She flung her hair behind her left shoulder, a well-practiced move. Well, Arthur obviously doesn't want to be the villain here, so as his fiancé I will, but not heartlessly. She laughed with a little trill. You'll be living with us, I suppose, so the best story will be for you to be my assistant. I have one already, but another would be helpful. She shrugged. So, while I get a contract drawn up complete with NDA, get the fetus aborted and name your price. Okay, even as a human facing an alpha, I had my limits about being humiliated. I'll take $1 billion at the end of the week to start, and then we can discuss my salary. Selena looked at me as though I'd peed on her shoe, which actually would be quite satisfying. I can't get $1 billion together in a week. I told her. Then you can't afford my child or afford me as your assistant. This is ridiculous, she announced, standing and flinging the strap of her Channel purse over her shoulder. I'll have Arthur deal with you. In a few long strides of her legs, she left, slamming the door shut behind her. Or rather, she would have, but I caught the door and called after her. But don't worry, I just want to talk to Arthur one more time. If Arthur really just wants to keep me as a mistress, I'll leave soon. She didn't bother to answer, probably thinking I was saying I'd leave to bargain for money. I didn't want money. I didn't want some alpha woman smiling while she destroyed my life. I wanted an explanation, a conversation. I wanted to know my relationship with my fated mate wasn't going to end so poorly. But then Selena paused and turned with an even bigger smile than before. You should attend the party this evening. There you can talk to Arthur all you like. Arthur said it was alphas only. She laughed. There will be plenty of your rank there, trust me. Then she executed a perfect runway turn and walked toward a red sports car parked on the street. I remembered the party would be at the Waldorf, so I didn't have to ask anyone for the address. Alone in the house, I bathed and shaved my legs and spent way too much time on my makeup. I had a very nice party dress in a red so deep it looked almost black. Off the shoulder with a full skirt, a classic. I put it on almost defiantly, trying to find more strength inside. I was going to a party and I was going to enjoy it, damn it. I slid into my best shoes and called for an Uber. The Waldorf was ablaze with lights and sparkling people. I went to the front door with my chin up and walked through the lobby, refusing to make eye contact with anyone. At the door of the ballroom itself, however, I was stopped by a hotel employee dressed in red and black. "Excuse me, miss," he said. "Humans require an alpha escort beyond this point." That strength I had stoked up inside drained away. Even dressed to the nines, I was being rejected out of hand. I stared at his polite but distant eyes. He was an omega, it was easy to see. I wanted to touch him to see if he flinched from being sullied by a mere human like me. This is Arthur's world, I thought, something I had never thought before during all our time together. He thinks I have no place here. Maybe he's right. "Iris." A familiar voice called my name from behind me, and I turned in surprise.